Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here on a really cold evening. And welcome to our True Blue Quintessential Express Adda. Adda, of course, being entirely untranslatable. But what we try and do is have a conversation, throw up some ideas, try and not interrupt you every 12 seconds, and try and get a conversation going. So we're delighted to have the Raghavan brothers with us today, Sriram and Sridhar Raghavan, director, writer, you of 1,000 bylines, and you also a writer, and given us a lot of films and things to think about. We've had a lot of birds on Adda earlier. We've had Nobel laureates, we've had geneticists, doctors, actors, musicians, scientists, politicians. So it's always a treat to speak to people who really make the change, who do things, who think and push stuff. So my colleague and eminent film critic, Shubhra Gupta, and I'm Seema Chishti, and a very warm welcome again. Welcome to the show. We'll kick off, and my colleague Shubhra will probably do the heavy lifting. But I was just wondering, I've heard you say in an interview sometime that you really admire the Coen brothers, you know, and you were particularly intrigued about how they managed to work together and pull it off well. And I know the two of you have worked together, you know, you've done a lot of intense television work together, but never quite in cinema. So why don't you kick off by telling us something about how you two interact on cinema, and after that.
Well, I mean, we are each other's sounding boards quite often. And whenever I do a script, he's usually among the first 2 or 3 people I'll narrate it to. And a couple of times he doesn't like my subject, but I still, you know, went ahead and made it and so on. And we did try to work together. It's just that, you know, tried to work together on a movie, and then I maybe take too much time, and at some point I think it became like, you know, because he's my brother, I mean, oh, I've got work at home, I've got kids to do something.
I have a very short attention span.
So, I mean, kind of, it didn't happen. But, I mean, I'm sure it will happen one day.
So are his reasons correct?
Yeah. Actually, see, the thing is, we are brothers. There are many, many brothers out there. We happen to be brothers. It's not the Coen brothers, XYZ brothers, whatever. So we actually interact pretty much on everything that we're doing. We're constantly discussing and chatting about it and brainstorming, seeing his edit, whatever and stuff. Regarding working together, he frankly doesn't need a writer. I mean, a full-time writer, because he himself is a writer. He has a fabulous team of people who've been working with him right from the beginning and stuff. And in terms of his work process, his work style, we have worked together a lot during our TV days and stuff like that. He really likes to spend a lot of time, 2-3 years on a project. And I'm like, unfortunately, very, I do 50 things at a time, and I'm not talking about screenplay writing. I have 50 things which interest me. I like to travel, I like to read, I like to disappear. So it's not very conducive to a full-time relationship on a working level. That's pretty much it, actually.
So basically, I wanted to ask you, how about sibling rivalry? Because brothers can actually, you know, do you have any...
I have a middle brother, so maybe they have sibling rivalry.
So you know,
it never entered.
You could probably kill each other on the spot because of, you know, how you
No, we could kill each other, but there's no rivalry involved.
None of that.
I mean, it's just...
Okay, all right.
So but actually, maybe, I don't know, you can talk better about stuff like this.
I don't think so. I mean, unless there's some terrific story he's got which he is not given to me and it's given to somebody else, then I may be feeling a little...
Which won't happen, hasn't happened.
Not yet, but why not?
Who knows? So I want to take you back, Sriram, to the time you actually entered cinema after doing some very interesting television. We were just speaking, just before we entered the room, we were talking about how television was at one point of time in this country a kind of a starting point for so many people who are now making so much good cinema. You were part of that. You were part of that journey. I wanted to know, if television hadn't been the way it was at that point of time, would you still have jumped into cinema?
Actually, with both of us, it's different because I passed out of the FTI in the late 80s, you know, and at that time, there was only Doordarshan. So after you pass out of the institute, either you join Doordarshan or you go into the ad industry or you go into the commercial movies kind of thing, you know. NFDC and these things were there, but those were like, there was a long list of people wanting to make films and so on. So, I mean, I used to kind of, I was sort of almost trained to look down on television when I passed out, At the same time, movies at that time, 90s were not the best, Hindi movies in that time, in that phase.
But it was the 80s, which was a terrible decade.
Well, 80s, I was in the institute the bulk of the time, so I used to watch great films there. So, but 90s, when I passed out, and I'm trying to do something, it was like really tough. And then satellite and everything came in early 90s, 92 or 92 it came in. So I used to, I have not really done so much. He's done a fantastic body of work in CID, Ahat, and a few other things. But I used to do TV just to, kind of make sure I can pay take care of myself for the next 3 months kind of thing. If I do one episode, okay, that's taken care of.
But Raman Raghav was your, it was like still a calling card, I would say, right?
But that was not made for television. That was made for what used to be called video magazines when VHS was there. No? And that was never released. So I don't know. If you want to see it, you have to ask me or somebody who, I think a couple of friends of mine in Delhi have got a copy of it. But
I might also have one, yeah.
Yeah, possible. So it's only bootleg versions available. And but Raman Raghav was, it helped me definitely get some kind of, show it to a few people. It became something to show after passing out.
What about you? Television and, and CID. And now how did CID happen? And I believe, like you was telling us, that it just got over 2 weeks ago. So 21 years of that program,
yeah? 25 actually, because
25?
when we worked on it first, it took 4 years to come on air. So what happened was, I won't bore people with this, but in the 90s, there was this phase where post-DD, there were like tons of channels who were planning to come in. BITV was also one of them. So Business India Television had commissioned Mr. BP Singh, who was the maker of the show, to do something for them, a supernatural show, a cop show. And I had written something. We used to make things called pilots, the first episode. And so I had written something a long time back for a friend of ours called Arunabo. And that got rejected. But Anjum Rajabali, who was in Business TV, said, I like the way you write, but I don't like what you've written. Which whatever. So why don't you meet BP Singh and do something with him? So, yeah, that's how we got in. And BP had these shows he wanted to do. He used to do a very big show called Ek Shunya Shunya in Marathi, which was a landmark police show. So that was the genesis of it. The channel never took off, but BP and I kind of got friendly eventually. And after 4-5 years, Sony bought the shows. So we were there at the beginning of the so-called satellite wave, which happened. And then I guess it's BP's conviction in the show, because it lasted 21 years. And that's a lot to do with him.
So, you were at the cusp of a very interesting technological change. So satellite TV comes and changes everything in the 90s. And now we're again at a kind of a different moment.
Now we're in the OTT
streaming
space
moment.
again, digital.
So do you want to kind of talk a little bit about how all that kind of informed your sensibilities? When you describe how you lived between Alankar and Apollo in Pune, and you had the theatre, which I think in a sense was what the bookshop is to the book. So there were slots about what kind of films were shown at 8:30, another the noon show in the evening, and that kind of fed your imagination.
Okay.
So take me through that time, and how is it different from how now is about streaming and everything's on all the time?
Right. So essentially, when we were growing up in Pune, we lived between two theatres. So one was Apollo and one was Alankar. What was interesting back then was there used to be 3 different shows running at the same time in the theatre. So 8:30 or 8:45 in the morning, there would be an older film. So if it's Hindi, it would be a Badla or a Khoon Pasina or something from the 70s or 60s or whatever. The afternoon show would be a film recently released in the last couple of years. The equivalent of a Shraddhanjali or a Tapasya or those kind. I'm talking about my... He's like...
They were much better films that were shown.
Yeah. Also, for some bizarre reason, these two come to mind.
You're known by the films you remember. Huh?
And then the main show... So, and in Alankar, they used to show English films in the morning. So you got to see films like Where Eagles Dare and Sergio Leone and stuff early in the morning and on screen. So there's a lot of that kind of viewing which used to happen, if that's what you're talking about. And I used to bunk school all the time. So I used to wind up watching all the morning shows. Whatever it took to be not in school from 9 to 3. So... that was that.
Basically, there used to be, what you can see on the big screen, any Bimal Roy film, you can see a film right from the late 40s onwards, and this is a successful Kismat used to be shown, and so on. So these are black and white and good new prints, and there was a big culture of, that was the only method actually. There was the only way to watch these films. Now, of course, the same films are available, but I don't know whether any of my, like, none of my assistants watch anything before K3G. Almost. They have not seen. They have not seen movies, you know. So, yeah. So it's scary. I mean.
K3G is basically retro, right? Everything is retro. Everything 20 years down the line. I mean, sometimes I wonder, you know, anything. Does anybody watch anything which was before 20 years ago and say, oh, that's a really old movie, you know, and then you say...
Now it's, I think it's 5 years has become retro now.
5 years,
I have a director friend who once said that there's a whole generation which kind of began with Dil Chahta Hai. So all their reference points are from that film onwards, which is slightly different for us, I guess. So very different. I mean,
I used to work with Ramu, and I used to talk to him about older movies and all. And one day he told me, Sriram, I've never seen a black and white film. Can you be? I said, you've not seen a black and white film? Yeah, he said,
But he worked in a video library and he'd never seen a black and white film.
Even more choice. I mean,
Wow.
he's got enough choices. He used to watch Beckener's Gold, Godfather, a few movies very often.
How about, so tell me a little bit about when you actually jumped into cinema and how did you think of Saif Ali Khan to do that role? That Ek Hasina Thi was absolutely, I remember as a practicing film critic, that movie came out of the blue and it fully blew all of us away because here was a chocolate, you know, Saif Ali Khan is a chocolate box hero. And you had him do the kind of stuff that I don't think any A-lister had done before. How did that work for you? And how did you convince Saif to do this role?
I think maybe because Saif had just sort of become an A-lister, if you call it that, you know, because before we did our film, I mean, what used to happen is I used to watch him speak on television or something like that, and I used to find him extremely articulate and terrific. I mean, he's a well-read chap and all that, but his movies are all like mostly, you know, not the type I would enjoy, you know. So I used to...
Do you remember any of these films?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, I remember quite a few. But I mean, they're okay. But they are not like, you know, movies they're not memorable films, you know, at all. So when we were casting for Ek Hasina Thi, I mean, Urmila was there and then we were looking for somebody. And I mean, I liked Saif, so I said, why not him? And so and we wanted a character who's got a sort of modeled on Charles Sobraj, you know, kind of a very charming person and at the same time can be anything else, you know, diabolical too, and so on. So, I mean, Saif was, and luckily we got along, we kind of, I mean, we had movies which we liked in common and so on. So, I mean, he was, and that time Dil Chahta Hai had just released and Kal Ho Na Ho was like on the verge of coming out. So he was in that space of getting a little more popular and becoming successful finally. So he was a little bit, you know, initially, you know, should I do it or not, and what will my sisters say and so on. But luckily, I mean, once he said yes, then he sank his teeth into it.
I just want to ask you about, you know, both of you and you particularly, this whole suspense as a genre in India. I mean, we read so much crime. We just had in the, I don't know if you read in the Indian Express, there was a story about the murder of a disappearance of a 22-year-old girl, which is so locked into the politics, to everything that's happening in society and the churn. But why did you sort of pick suspense as a tool to deliver your stories or your thing?
I mean, there is no you know, proper answer. Like Hitchcock has a story, you know, where when he was a kid, his dad gave him a note and said, go and give it to the local police station. You know, and he went there and the note said, okay, lock this boy up for 1 hour. So I had no such traumatic kind of a story. So it was just that I think it was a kind of a natural progression right from, if you take, say, Enid Blyton. I mean, when we were in the 4th standard and 5th standard, you read Enid Blyton, and we have read all of them. Then you follow it with Agatha Christie and Chase, and then, of course, there is the American writers, I mean, Chandler, everything. So, I mean, it's like asking Woodhouse why he writes about, fun stuff, funny, stories. I don't know. It's just that it attracts me more, and perhaps you too, so.
It's got to do with, I guess, just that. The same thing, organic thing of moving from Blyton, etc. What we read, what we really enjoyed reading was stuff like James Hadley Chase and Agatha Christie and that entire James Cain and stuff like that. So, I mean, I grew up for a few years in London. I used to watch a lot of those kind of shows, those kind of movies. I don't know why. And we never even thought there's a choice, actually. It's how we just enjoyed the genre a lot. Dad also used to read it a lot. And yeah, so.
Okay, I have to ask you this, and I warned you before the show. But what happens at the end of Andhadhun? I mean, as I was telling him, they really sort of, kicking the can down the road has been taken to its, these are all spoilers, I'm sorry, but, has been taken to its complete, and is he blind or is he not?
See, I mean, when we designed the thing, it was like,
He's not going to answer that
no, no,
question.
I mean, I'm going to...
We're not proceeding with the rest of the show till you
but
answer
I'm
this.
saying we had 2 or 3 possible explanations. Possible, this could happen, that could happen. The whole idea was that if 2 people are going to see the movie, A says this happened and B says this happened. This was the desire, the dream, what we wanted. And but now, I mean, strangely, that movie has kind of been embraced. It's no longer in my hands, and people have come up with some 15, 20 different explanations. Some of them are plain ridiculous, but I said, let it be.
Which is your favorite?
My favorite is he's got the rabbit size.
Rabbit
I mean,
size.
that's fab. The rabbit is blind.
It's a blind rabbit.
Yeah.
Rabbit which is, hurled into middle distance.